In this video, we're going to show you how to make your very own Christmas Santa sacks. These sacks are completely versatile. You can tie them with a ribbon or cord with bells at the end, depending on your purpose. You can also make them to be any size that you require. To make our Santa sacks, we need two different types of material. Today we're going to be using a piece from the Liberty Cotton Christmas range for the outside of our sack, and we have our red Emma Louise cotton for the inside lining. Both pieces are 50 centimeters by the width of the fabric in size, and we need to make sure that they are completely wrinkle free. We've already ironed off the Emma Louise, and now we're just going to give the Liberty a quick iron over. Once it's completely wrinkle free, we're ready to move on to cutting. We're going to make the same cuts to both of our types of fabric, both the Liberty and the Emma Louise. If you don't have a rotary cutter and a mat, you can use just a ruler, a pencil and some scissors to mark out where you need to cut and then use the scissors to cut across, but we are going to use our rotary cutter and mat today. Just going to fold the bottom of the fabric up to the selvage so that it fits onto the mat. And we're going to line up the bottom of the fabric with the bottom of our mat and the side as well, making sure everything is perfectly straight so we get a nice straight cut line. We're going to get our ruler and we're going to make a cut at the 14.5-inch mark, lining up the ruler with the mat and straight up at the 14.5 inches. The next cut we need to make, we're just going to open up our piece of fabric, line up the fold with the outside edge of the mat, just barely touch the outside of the fold over the line. We're going to cut that off later. And this time we're going to make a cut at the 18.5-inch mark. Again, lining up your fabric with the bottom and the side of the mat and the ruler with the markings on the mat as well to make sure we get a perfectly straight line. And again, this one is 18.5 inches. Now we're actually going to use this offcut to make the tags for our sack. So we're just going to cut off the selvage with our ruler and rotary cutter straight up. And this is going to give us the pieces we need for our tags. The last thing we need to do is just get rid of the fold. So we're going to turn our piece of fabric around. Again, line it up with the bottom of the mat and the side to make sure everything is straight, and just barely cut off the very edge of the fabric to get rid of the fold line, as you can see. So now we have two pieces of Liberty. We do exactly the same thing to the Emma Louise. We have two pieces of that, and we also have our tags. So what you need to do here is just snip straight through the tags to cut that strip in half. So we've lined up the edges and cut straight through the middle. So now we have our two sections for our tags. The next step is to start pinning our pieces of fabric together. So take the two outside pieces and we're going to lay them down right sides together. If you have a directional piece like we do here, we need to make sure that they're both going in the same direction and you haven't accidentally turned one upside down. We're going to pin right down the long sides, all the way around, and this is just going to keep it nice and secure in place. So now we're going to sew using a 1/4-inch seam. We're going to go backwards and forwards at the start just to make sure it's nice and secure. So all the way down, pivot across all the way down the short side and all the way back up the long side, again going backwards and forwards when you reach the other end. We're going to do the same thing with the Emma Louise, and then we're just going to make our tags, again putting them right sides together. We're going to pin them. And we're going to leave a 2-inch hole opening on one long side so we can turn them out. So we're going to start at one pin, go backwards and forwards, so all the way around until you get to the other pin, and go backwards and forwards again to seal it off. You are going to have that 2-inch wide opening, and that's fine. For our lining pieces, we've put them right sides together. We're going to go backwards and forwards in the corner, so all the way along the top end, come down and stop. We're going to go backwards and forwards and release our needle. We're going to create a bit of a hole here, come down to the next pin, go backwards and forwards again to start, finish that line, go all the way across the bottom, and then stop at the other corner, backwards and forwards again to seal it off. We're going to have this opening here so we can pull all our material through and make it right sides out later on. Now we're sitting at our machine and we're going to do all the sewing we've just talked about, backwards and forwards at the beginning to make it nice and tight, and then sewing straight down with a 1/4 inch seam until we get to the corner and stop. Leave the needle down and so you can pivot around without moving the fabric. Just need one extra stitch to make sure we've got our 1/4 inch seam. Rotate the fabric around the needle, come down a couple of inches to your pin. Take the pin out so we don't sew over it, and stop, backwards and forwards to tie it off. And then we're going to release the needle, pull it out of the machine, come down a few inches to the next point, put your needle back in, backwards and forwards to start the new line, and then continue sewing. Again, we're going to pivot in the corner, leave the needle down, rotate the fabric, and continue sewing. So now we have our lining fabric with the hole at the top, sewn down the edge, and then again we have our little hole at the bottom, sewn around the rest of the edge, back up to the top. We've also sewn our little tags. So now what we're going to do is cut all the corners without cutting into the sew line. This is just going to get rid of the bulk in the corners so we end up with a nice crisp corner. We're going to do that to all of our pieces on all the corners. So here you can see we've cut off all of our corners and we're going to turn out our tags. So we're using the little opening that we left to rotate back to right sides out. Just unfold it, one side, pull it out, and then through the other side. Then we're going to use our little purple thing to poke out all the corners. Just fold over the seam to match and give it a good finger press down. We'll take it over to the iron and give it a good press. And now we're going to also press out our seams on our other pieces so that they're open. So we're opening up the seam and pressing them flat. So here you can see we've ironed our tags. We've also ironed the seams on our 2 pieces of other fabric, making sure they're nice and wide open. We're going to give our Santa sack a nice box pleat in the corner. This helps it stand up when it's got lots of goodies on the inside. So all we do is open up our seam and we're going to join the corner to the seam underneath. So open up the seam, we're going to get our pin and we're going to stick it through the seam on one side so it comes through the seam on the other side of the corner. We're using ours about 1 inch down, but you can do any size box pleat that you like. 1.5, 2 inches, it doesn't matter. So we do the same to both corners. Stuck our pin through, one side straight through, and then we're going to measure out our distance, 1 inch from the corner, straight up. And just rule straight across with a pencil, using a ruler to make sure it's straight. Again, remember you can have any size box seam that you like. Once you've got your ruler mark straight across, we're going to take it over to the machine and sew that line. Then bring it back and cut straight across just underneath that sew line to again get rid of the bulk of the corner. And do that to all 4 corners. The next step is to take our outside piece of fabric, in this case our Liberty cotton, and we're going to turn it right sides out. Get right down into the corners to poke them out, so we've got our nice flat box corner. Give it a little bit of a shake, and we're going to sit it inside our lining piece. So this is going to make our lining and our outside face right sides together. Pop it down. We're going to make it all match up with our outside opening seams. So we're going to go seam to seam with the lining and the outside piece, making sure they match up nice and perfectly. And we'll pop some pins in to hold it in place. Pin in one side, turn it around, and same on the other seam. So now we have our lining on the outside. Just give it a nice little shake to get it all down, moved out of the way. Now we're going to take this over to the machine and we're going to sew the edges. So we pop a couple more pins in for stability. We're going to start at the seam and sew 1/4 of an inch all the way around back to where we started. And this is going to join our lining and our outside pieces together. So starting at the seam, 1/4 of an inch stitch line, and we're going to go all the way around. Making sure you remove your pins as you go so you don't sew over them. We always make sure we remove our pins so we don't accidentally break our needle. As you can see now, we've created our sew line all the way around, going backwards and forwards as we reach the end to keep it nicely tight in place. Here's where we're going to use that hole we left in the lining to pull everything right sides out. So we've pulled the outlining of the sack and rotated everything, put the lining back into the sack. You're going to give it a little bit of a shake so it fits. Flatten it all out nice. Now we're going to iron our edges so that they're nice and flat and you can't see any of the lining on the outside. So just give it a little bit of a press with your finger to start off with. You can see how it wants to sit. We're going to iron that down. We're also going to iron the opening in the bottom of the lining, folding in those seams. Give it a good press as well with the iron. Now we've come back, we're going to pin that hole closed, and then we're going to sew 1/8 of an inch across that hole to close it. Again, going backwards and forwards at the start and the end to seal it. We're also going to take the top of the sack and we're going to sew another 1/8 of an inch line all the way around the opening, and that's just going to close off and give us our top stitch. So as you can see, we've sewn our hole closed. We can go back down into the sack. We've also sewn our top stitch at the top, so it's all now nice and closed. The last thing we need to do is sew our tags. So we take our 2 tags that we've previously sewn and we're going to attach them onto the seam lines on each side. So to do this, we're going to measure down about 2 inches. Again, you can do any size that you like. It's completely up to you. We're doing ours at about the 2-inch line. I'm just going to grab a pin and mark off that spot so we know where we're going. And then we're going to grab our ties, fold them in half so we can find the middle point. Give it a good finger press so you've got a crease line to work with. Nice press down So you've got that center line. Then you're going to line up that line with the top of the 2-inch mark that you made and pin it in. Like so. And then also line up the bottom of your finger press line with the seam underneath and again pin it in place. And then do the same to the other side of the sack with the other tie, measuring down 2 inches so that they match, marking it in, and then we're going to sew backwards and forwards straight across the bottom, and then backwards and forwards, stop, go up to the top, backwards and forwards, sew straight across, and backwards and forwards on the other side. Once you've finished sewing, you can see we now have 2 loops sewn into the side of our sack. This is where we're going to thread our ribbon so we're able to tie off our sack. We've attached pins to the end of the ribbon so you can easily thread it through these loops. We're going to thread the ribbon in opposite directions through these loops so the ends of the ribbon meet on the other side of the sack. As you can see here, we're pulling through the ribbon so the 2 ends meet on the other side. Then we're going to turn it over and grab our second piece of ribbon, and we're going to thread this piece back through against the other piece of ribbon so these 2 ends meet on the other side of the sack. Once you've pulled through both pieces of ribbon, you can detach the pins attached to the ends so your ribbon is completely free and ready to use. We're going to stuff our bag with a bit of padding just so you can see the effect of what it will look like once it's full of goodies on Christmas morning. These bags are completely versatile. You can use them for whatever purpose you may desire. Christmas sacks, birthday presents, maybe even a bag to hold your kids' Legos or toys in. To close the bag, simply pull each of the ribbons tight and it will close the top of the sack. Tie off the ribbon with a couple of simple bows and your sack is ready to use. Remember, you can make any size sack you like. They're so easy and quick to make, they're perfect for beginners or a novice sewer. And don't forget, you can use whatever you like to tie off the top of your bags.